And yeah, we're live.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us. If you're here, tweet the link, go to my Twitter, share the link. That would
You
be
can find it on all of our internet spaces.
Instagram is
Yeah, I
appreciated.
got the notification on my phone, so it's really good. We are here for live show number 1 of the Legacy Read Along. Today, we are talking all things Legacy of Ash by Matthew Ward, which is book 1, the Legacy Trilogy. Book 2, Legacy of Steel, comes out November 3rd. Get your pre-orders in wherever you pre-order your books. We have Matthew Ward who are going to be joining us today for a little bit. We're going to try and keep things spoiler-free. So if you may not have made it to the end, or you're joining because you're interested in the world and the lore and things like that, you should be safe. Hello, Selena. Hello. Hi. Thank you all for joining us.
Hello, can you guys know where you are in Legacy of Ash? If you finished, you can leave your rating for the book. Feel free. And if you're not finished, no pressure. Just kind of tell us where you are in the read along right now.
Who's your favorite character? Who do you want their head to get chopped off? I'm looking at you. Yeah. So if you have any questions or anything you want to know about the story, go ahead and leave those below so we can get started. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Elena. Elena, you're good because we're going to keep it spoiler-free.
It is a spoiler-free moment, so no pressure.
And see, at this point, you can marathon both books. You can hit them back to back.
I don't know who would want to read a marathon of 2 800-page books, but if that's your thing.
It's some people's thing, you know? It's some people's thing.
It's okay, babe.
Maybe has it on their shelves, so you're going to get to it pretty soon.
Okay, did not finish. 451 pages in. Okay, that's promising.
That's very promising. And the 450 page mark is right at the start of the war. Really? When the Hadari and the Victor and his friends starting to go head to head. From that point, really, because we're not answering that. Lay hands on yourself. I remember when MJ finished it in the stream.
Definitely a 5-star. We love to see it. Well, okay, that's a different response. It was so many characters in the book, and I think when I finished the first book, I was just like torn between, because I was so attached to so many characters, and this is the first fantasy book where all the characters were really developed. And so when you get done with a big book, you're like stuck on that one person that you loved. But there was a lot of people in this book that I was just like, well, dang, what's gonna happen? Like, I want to know.
Who's your favorite character, everybody? Like, one of the things that I loved about this book was that none of the characters were quite what they seemed.
Yes.
Especially, like, if you compare, like, just the little bit you get from, like, the prologue, if we're going to call it that, versus, like, all the characters. Like, this Black Knight. Okay, and then what he ends up being, this pillar of redemption and this rebellion, Jasiri, and then what he ends up being, the spoiled little sister Colleen, and what she ends up doing. So the development of the characters was chef's kiss.
Yes.
Because everyone
review video, I said that the synopsis on the back of the book and the actual book, it was
one of our main characters isn't even in the synopsis. It's like, okay. And the lore, the magic, you know, we've got gods at play. I love stories with gods because gods are like always an unpredictable element in the story.
Yes. I love the fact that the god in this book was tangible and
tangible. We're gonna call it that. Okay.
She was reachable, you know. You didn't have to pray.
Very.
You like Jasiri, Anna, and Mel. Okay.
My favorite character, Kirkus, goofy old.
I loved Kirkus.
Kirkus reminded me of one of the guys from Kings of the Wild, if you've read that.
I have not read that book.
My favorite character was obviously Victor. Victor had no competition in this year's story.
Victor's competition was Victor. It was Victor's mental state was his
Victor was here,
competition.
and I love to hate Miss Abigail. So many characters, I love them all, minus Colleen and Abigail. I will forever hate them both. Rosa, I love Rosa.
Colleen. I don't think you're gonna forever hate Colleen. Whatever, maybe.
All right. So, anyone, leave your spoiler-free questions or out of context spoiler-free questions in the comments so that we can chat with the author in just a few minutes.
Yeah. Actually, it's been about 5 minutes, so we can go ahead and add him to our live. Matthew Ward, everyone, welcome him.
All right. So if any of you are unfamiliar with who this is, that's his name right there in very big text. He's the author of Legacy of Ash and the soon-to-be-released Legacy of Steel. How are you today?
I'm not too bad. Been a long day, but it's the weekend, so that's always helpful.
That is always helpful.
So me and Aaron put together a list of questions, both about the author himself and the book, that we're going to kind of run down through and get some answers, get some insight. And again, if you have spoiler-free questions, you guys can leave them in the chat, and we'll get to those closer to the end of the live.
It's very rare that you can pin down an author other than telling them about your tears and the suffering they put you through on Twitter. So we're going to take advantage of the opportunity that we have, people. Get some answers.
If you guys have problems with Colleen or Abigail, this is the guy to throw them to.
Yes, lay your problems at his doorstep.
Okay, for the first question, I guess we'll get started with that one. What was your inspiration behind Legacy of Ash? More specifically, the world itself, or book world.
So the world goes a really long way back, because Legacy of Ash is something that's kind of been being worked on for upwards of 20 years at this point. Not in terms of the writing, but in terms of the setting. So probably the clearest sort of ancestor of it is actually a PC game called Thief from about 20 years ago by Looking Glass Studios. It's one of those IPs that's been and gone over the years. There was a fourth one a few years back now. But basically it was a type of fantasy world that I hadn't seen before at the time, because it was a little bit of technology, a little bit of magic, a big nameless city on the edge of a forest full of pagans and dryads and things like that. And that's kind of where the first bug got put in my brain for, oh, there's a thing here. I wonder, what would that look like if I did something like that? And it's kind of grown from there ever since.
You definitely put your own twist on it, I will say. Okay, so for the next question, Lord Cadra is a very different kind of hero in the sense that he doesn't actually see himself as a hero, and the council uses him more as a figurehead than they do as an actual hero. So do you think it's important to have a figurehead of resilience or to a resistance, more importantly, than it is to actually have someone who is the resistance in the story?
Well, I think it's causes need people to rally around, and that's something that Victor understands, because that's kind of, again, not being spoilery about it, that's a lot of what drives the early part of the book, is that need to, it's not just enough for something to happen, someone has to be seen to be the person in charge of it. And sometimes that can be a little bit misleading, because that's one of the horrible truths about leadership, isn't it, really, is that truth becomes currency, it's not absolute anymore. So I think a lot of, not just with Tressia, but actually with the Hadari as well, there is a lot of, this is what they say the thing is, but the truth is over here somewhere, and half of the effort they put into it is just go, no, ignore this thing, look at this, this is what you need to pay attention to. And it's something that, Tressia's everything in the society is just a series of masks a lot of the time. It's what's really going on isn't what you see on the surface.
To piggyback that, before we go to the next question, speaking about Victor, in a lot of ways, Victor is both the villain and the hero in the story, because if we think about where we start off in the prologue and the perception that the people of Tressia have about Victor and his actions that led to what we get to 15 years later, he is both the thing that quells the rebellion and brings it back to life. So What is that like? Choosing to have that one character play both those roles?
Well, he's someone that it's that weird conflict, almost the dichotomy. That's a long word. Dichotomy, a long word for a Saturday evening. Between the two roles that he's trying to play that make him who he is, because he's never quite comfortable what he's doing, but he's always determined to do the right thing, or at least his version of the right thing, which might not be the right thing at all.
It definitely doesn't lack for conviction. I can say that much.
I think there's a lot of false illusions in this book with Jasiri, who he's supposed to be, who his mother was. I think everyone's supposed to be. Kalin, there's this figurehead of security all throughout Tressia that is just, there is no security, really, which is probably why they give them so many false illusions.
Well, tradition's a huge weight on everyone in it, and that's kind of the thing, really, with not just with this book, with the trilogy as a whole. It's that idea that there's a certain amount of baggage that you pick up from essentially your parents and the people that came before you. You've got to behave this way and do these things and do it this way and in this particular order. And it's not left everything in a terribly good state, but then actually standing up and trying to do something about it's really hard. And it's watching people either try or fail to do that along the way that gives us the story.
All right. Okay. For the third question that we have is, what encouraged you to make the goddess in Milana's story someone who was real, in a sense, instead of just making her someone that they worshipped? And we have a lot of deities or entities in the book that are actually real characters instead of just being mythological people.
Favorite demon doll.
Yes, the favorite demon doll.
No, I was thinking about this, and I actually don't know where that comes from. I think part of it is probably from sort of old films like Jason and the Argonauts and so on, where actually while the gods are all-powerful figures sitting on high, they are still talking to each other and bickering and interfering in things exactly the same way that everyone that they can see in their little mirrored pool is behaving. And it's just nice to have that sense of these are people that you can at least think you can understand, because of course, you know, they're always going to be a little bit beyond everyone else because they're gods and we're not. But the idea you can have a conversation with them is just far more appealing to me than someone who just issues commandments from down and on high. It's just fun. And because they've got a certain amount of freedom, they can do fun things to everybody else.
Gods here definitely have a more hands-on role in the story. Usually when we see gods, we see their influence and it's subtle, and people wonder, is this my own mind? Am I being influenced by these things? And the gods are like, no, I am here. This is me. You are calling on me. Here I have shown up. The gods and the devils or demons, if you will, they're very, you know, that this is a transaction that's happening. Like, you're getting something, but there are going to be consequences. There are going to be things. None of the gods are like inherently like pure or good, which is something that I really enjoy in a god, because I don't think that that exists when you have that level of power that it is all, you know,
good or bad.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance.
Oh, there's also a thing as well with them, is that they're not all necessarily at the same level of experience. Without getting into spoilers and bits and pieces, is that some of them have definitely been at this a lot longer than other ones, and that shows in their actions within the story. Or at least I hope it does. I mean, you tell me.
I think part of the narrative I remember was finding out that to worshippers, all gods or the gods that we call are the same, versus on the other end, the same person is not always answering the call. To keep it
vague. That I liked most about Milana and her relationship with the goddess is that at one point, Milana takes things into her own hands and kind of says, you know what? I'm just going to put this out there in the universe and this is what we're going with. And then her goddess is just like, well, okay, that's not what I said, but sure. And I think that a lot of times we worship a god and we pray to them and we have this illusion of who they are. And then when we meet them in person, if they're not who we imagined them to be, we still stick with whatever it was in our head versus what's actually standing before us.
Or how we're going to subvert the gods that we have and say, okay, I don't want to have the appearance of interfering in these mortal matters, so I'm going to send my lackey or someone else to go do this thing that I should not be doing.
One of the things that I loved about this book is that there are multiple shifts in the plot. Like we talked about earlier, the synopsis gives you the inkling of what the book is going to be about, and then when you get into it, a lot of things happen, and there's a lot of shifts. We have more than one villain in the book, more than one technically war, and so what key points helps you create the perfect villain? And are you a fan of redemption arcs where a villain can kind of redeem themselves and become a good person?
Oh, I love redemption arcs. I particularly like redemption arcs that then end up with a horrible, tragic death, because if they'd just started on their redemption arc 3 pages earlier, it would have been fine. Or it would have hurt less anyway. But I think with villains, it's like with the gods thing. It's almost cliche now, but that idea that a villain is the hero of their own story, I think you have to be able to empathize with what they're doing, if only for a little moment. You go, no, that's not me. I don't really want to do all those terrible things, but I can kind of see what. No, I mustn't. I'm not going to do it. I'm not the bad guy here. And because it's that thing of the difference between good and evil is often just how far you're prepared to go to get your own aims through, whether they're selfish or not. And certainly we have one particular character in this book who definitely doesn't have a lot of limits in terms of what they're prepared to do. Whereas, of course, some of the other characters, some of which that they are the good guys. The thing that keeps them being the good guys is the fact that they get to a line and they go, actually, no, this is this far and no further. That would be bad. We don't want to do that. Because, I mean, people have mentioned in the comments about Abigail, and it's that terrible, terrible thing, because my agent loved hating Abigail. It was one of the bits that I got very, very early on, and I was thinking, should I say that I actually kind of sort of agree with a load of the things and can see why she wants to do it? It's just that she's horrible, and maybe she shouldn't do some of those things. So I don't know. Hopefully he's not watching this.
So Abigail didn't frustrate you as much as the readers.
I find myself identifying more with villains oftentimes with heroes, because usually heroes are born of circumstance. It's like, oh, I'm the chosen one, or I'm the only one around that can do this thing. But villains, they are convicted in a way that heroes usually are not. Heroes, a lot of times, they waffle, they waver. Villains are like, I am willing to go as far as necessary, even to my own detriment, which is something that I enjoy about our villain in this story, because they mention often how their duty to the Republic is higher than anything else, and that includes familiar friendships and things like that. And so we see how far our villain is willing to go for the sake of the Republic, and they don't let personal feelings about things or morals, any small beans like that, interfere with what they think the right thing to do in their end game is. And so that's I usually connect more with villains, because they're down for it in a way the heroes are just like, I have to rise to the occasion.
I think that I like having a female villain, because I feel like a lot of times females are the more ruthless ones, and they have a plan and they're thorough, and they just seem to see it through a lot more. And I feel like we got that in this book, because we have a female villain who is not going to let anyone being literally anything stand in her way.
And I love that our villain was a mom, because I find oftentimes in fantasy, you either have like the warrior woman who's super badass, or you have the mom who so far will only do so much because family. And like it's kind of subverted both of those things, because our villain is not a warrior in action, but you might say that she has a warrior spirit, and she's willing to fight the battle on her types of grounds, but she doesn't let the typical things that kind of best women characters in these types of settings rule her, which is family, relationships, things that would be deemed soft. So it's like, hats off to her. I hate her, but
yes. Very effective. She will manipulate when she needs to. She will use violence when she needs to. Sometimes she's very honest, and I sometimes she lies. I'm just like, I can't pin this person down, but she definitely changes for who she's dealing with, and whatever method she feels like is going to be more successful in that time.
Oh, she's definitely right as well, as far as she's concerned. Even right to the very end.
Yes.
And she has no remorse. I love that. She does not waver or waffle really about what she's done. She's like, I did what I had to do, and that was no more and no less. And, trying to teach someone else that this is how it has to be done. If you want it done, you got to do it yourself. So getting into our next question, in writing legacy, I know that's something you said this has been an idea of yours for a number of years, decades really. When thinking of this world, what came first, the plot or the characters?
Oh, it's absolutely the characters. So Victor and Jasiri have always been at the heart of this, always way back to the start. And Malachi, actually, as it happens. Kalen came a little bit later along, and then the rest of them came along with the writing of the story. And that's not true. Actually, Milana has been around for a long time as well, but she wasn't planned to be as much a part of the story. But now it's really hard to imagine it without her.
Yes.
But yeah, so really sort of Victor and Jasiri's relationship with a small r has always been the heart of what's gone on. And then as other characters have come in to serve that part of the story, then they've ended up with their own stories, and they've then ended up driving the narrative in interesting directions. Because there are some in there, for example, so Ashana was one of the characters that was never really supposed to be in the story. But then when Milana started becoming a huge part of essentially the Hadari half of the story, then Ashana showed up and suddenly made everything click. But there are other characters who were written in really just to sort of serve functions of people talking to other characters so we can have conversations. So characters like Savaka and Kirkus, and then they end up being really quite important to what's going on, actually. And it's fun writing it that way, because I get to then almost experience the story the way that you do if you're reading a book. I have written a few books along the way where I have meticulously planned out, okay, here's the narrative we're going to go through here, chapter by chapter by chapter by chapter. And the result's fine at the end. The result's great at the end, but it can be quite soul-destroying and tedious to write sometimes because I already know everything that's going to happen, so it's not fun in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly with Legacy of Ash, I just let the story do what it needed, or rather, the characters told me what they wanted, and I just wrote it up, really.
And that's like a follow-up question. Is, would you say that you're a pantser or a planner?
Again, it will depend book by book. As I say, the book I wrote immediately after Legacy of Ash, which I'm not doing anything with at the moment, that was something that I'd literally planned chapter by chapter for 140,000 words, and I knew that there was things I had to hit at every point. Whereas the Legacy books generally have been a lot more freeform. I know that I've got to get to. I normally know the end and the midpoint. It's really unusual for me to know the precise ending of a book, but for the Legacy ones, I do. And then there's the midpoint where I go, once I'm past this point, it becomes a lot easier. And then the midpoint keeps moving further and further and further back. And you think, oh God, is it ever going to end? Because there is a point involving one of the characters that is about 2/3 of the way through Legacy of Ash. And you think, once I'm past this point, I know I'm on the downhill stretch and we're heading towards the end of the book. And then, 50,000 words go past, 100,000 words go past, 150,000 words go past, and you think, hang on a minute, what's going on here? But you know that it has to sit in that place so that all of the character beats fall where they want to. So the answer is yes, I'm definitely one of those things.
As a reader, I feel vindicated in a way because as I'm reading, I don't really know where we're going. And so it's like, okay, I apparently was not the only one who we're finding out where we're going together as we're going through this process. So, we love to see it.
Yeah, I feel like I had the same experience because the things that I was anticipating in Legacy of Ash, when we got to that point, something else darker was hovering, and I was just like, wow, I was anticipating this, but now I just, like, what's happening here? It was so many moments where I was just like, okay, this was supposed to be the big thing, but it's actually not that big, and now we have something bigger on the way.
I love those little subversions where like you can tell the author is leading you in a certain direction, and then when you get there, you realize it's an entirely misdirect because the thing or one of the things has really been happening this whole time, but because you thought you were so smart, you thought you were figuring out what was going on, and then like, damn, you were not. So I would say that you said you knew the ending that you envisioned when you started Legacy. Now that you are done with Nameless Book 3, is it the same?
Yes, it's absolutely the same. In fact, it's closer than I thought it was going to be. I mean, I literally have a file on my computer which is sort of where all of this was going to end, and that file is 23 years old or something at this point. And as I got to it, actually, all these things are falling into the places that I need them to. That's really good, because I thought I was going to have to sort of break faith with what I was doing. No, that's actually, and I'll the actual sort of for want of a better phrase, the finale scene on it. Go, no, this actually is exactly where it needs to be, and it's kind of in the place that I said that it was going to. That's a bit weird, isn't it? So that was really, really good. I think I could pretend that that's because I'm really good at what I'm doing, but I think it's mostly dumb luck in the end. So I'll take it. It works.
Well, that's a good feeling to have set up book 1 and book 2 in a way that made the ending a little more easier to write without you having to pull at straws and draw connections and force things into place, because sometimes we have that with the finale of a book where it's like, okay, I need this to happen, so it's gonna happen.
I think part of it is because all the way through I've tried to, where I can, write the books to be as standalone as possible. So there is the beginning and a middle and end of a story in each of the volumes in the book. So you're really telling a separate story with the same characters that has a couple of through lines in from the books that came before, which makes my life a lot easier and hopefully makes it a little bit easier to read as well. So I think if you have been reading Legacy of Ash some time ago and you come into Legacy of Steel now, it shouldn't be that hard to pick up where we're coming in with it, because actually everything should be covered off and everything should make sense. And if it doesn't, there is a plot, a fairly detailed plot summary lurking on my website now. So if anyone's actually read the first one some time back, wants to get into the second one without reread, you can just go and read up on the website.
Oh, that's great.
Those are always helpful. Always. I love it when they have in the front of the book or it's somewhere like, okay, here's what happened the last time we saw you.
that is so convenient, especially for a 750-page book, because it's like, I got to reread this one, and then the next one's 700 pages too.
Then when the third book comes in, I got to do another round of rereads.
No, I can remember doing that with much, much shorter books and go, right, I have to reread everything in the series up to that point. That's just me hitting the microphone for effect now. And yes, I think certainly by the time you get to book 3, you go, okay, there's 500,000 words I need to read to remind myself of what's happened at this point. That's a bit hard on people, that one, I think. So
a little bit about influences. So everyone is influenced by things around them, and then as a writer, we're curious about what books or series have you feel like influenced you the most as both a reader and or a writer.
Okay, so I'm very much a Lord of the Rings guy, and have been my whole life, because it is just great, and it's one of those things that that's really horrible answer, isn't it? But what is fantastic for is it shows you how a world is built, because just the attention to detail, because Tolkien was working on Arda on and off for years and years and years and years and years, and so many rewrites and so many different layers of development in there, and so I loved that as a reader for ages. And then I spent several years essentially spearheading Games Workshop tabletop license within the Lord of the Rings setting, and nothing gives you a deeper appreciation for the detail of an IP than delving into as a licensed work, because you have to know it back to front for that. And just some of the little bits and bobs that I was sort of aware of when I was reading it just for fun, but then getting into the weeds on it was really, really good, interesting. And you can see all this, how everything goes together and it's just lovely. I mean, beyond that, I have a lot of influence from writing styles from Bernard Cornwell, particularly his Sharp series, and what used to be called the Warlord Chronicles. I think they refer to it as something else now, which is his Arthurian trilogy, which is a lot darker, a lot grittier than anything I do. But in terms of actually where my influences in terms of sort of action writing styles come from, that's absolutely from Cornwall. Beyond that, things like dialogue and bits and pieces, that comes from largely from Timothy Zahn, who's a science fiction writer primarily, and then going back into the 60s and 70s, a guy who used to write thrillers called Alistair MacLean, who had a wonderful way of just having quite a light, bouncy, conversational tone with all of his characters. And I've been reading those for upwards of 30 years at this point, and I just love them. They've aged a little bit, as you can imagine, because thrillers are something that definitely live in their time, and you look back even 5-10 years later and go, so that's what they were worried about when he was writing this book. But actually just sort of the inter-character relationships are absolutely wonderful in those, and just very, very concise, witty dialogue.
Very good. Yeah. Tolkien is like such a big influence for fantasy, any consumer, and really of people that write, that read, that do games, all that. You can see his influence, and now also starting to have Jordan influence. You can see as the tides roll, how people are constantly influenced by like the pillars of the SFF community.
Yes.
All right, it's elevator pitch time. Are you ready? We're in an elevator for 60 seconds. That's all the time that you have. How do you pitch me on the whole trilogy? How do you do it?
So I'm dreadful at this. I've always been dreadful at this. So the way I tend to describe Legacy of Ash is that it's a story of a new generation working to correct the mistakes of the one that came before. I probably already said this actually, even in the video, because I've got that little imagination when it comes to this kind of thing. But it's kind of true of the whole trilogy as well. But of course, as the books go on, the characters are then trying to deal with their own mistakes as well as the ones they've inherited from somewhere else. So it's character-driven epic fantasy. I like to describe it as something that I could have enjoyed when I was a teenager as well as today. And I think that's something that that's something I really like from Lord of the Rings, is it's something that you can enjoy young and then you can read more layers into as you get older. But absolutely character-led epic fantasy, where decisions matter, but there's not, shall we say, I don't think it's gratuitous at any point. I think what happens is what you want for the drama in there. But yes, big epic fantasy world, gods, monsters, things that might be demons or might not, clashes of huge armies, and horrible, horrible stakes to contend with. I think that's what I've got. That's not even 60 seconds. I'm not really bad at it.
I'm a character reader, so when you said character driven, I was already sold.
I love revenge stories. I love war fantasy. War fantasy is like my favorite subgenre, I would say, of fantasy. I love a good battle. I love like seeing the build up to it, and then even the battle usually ends up being the smallest part, and then is the things that led to it. How are we going to resolve it? My favorite thing. Yes. Let's put the comments. Let's see what the people are saying.
Alrighty, so.
I need to know what woman took Abigail's inspiration from, because she is the one character is like to end myself.
So Abigail has DNA from all kinds of bits and pieces. Like a lot of the Tressians, she's a not terribly complimentary reflection of a certain kind of British politician, it has to be said. So takes a lot of roots from a lot of sort of stories like that way back in the day. So one example I could point you at is the original House of Cards series. The late 80s, early 90s. So Francis Urquhart's wife Elizabeth in that is a very Lady Macbeth figure, just sort of prodding and poking from behind the scenes. You go back about another 15 years before that, there was a BBC adaptation of I, Claudius, And Caesar Augustus's wife Livia in that is very much that kind of thing as well, is that I have a very clear idea of what I want to achieve. You don't deserve this. I'm going to take it away and give it to someone else. And you'll probably not enjoy the process. It's that kind of thing. I don't know that you tend to get many characters like her, certainly not in television these days.
I don't think so either. I think especially because she has such a strong attachment to this power that she technically wasn't born into. She acquired her power through marriage the same way that Malachi did, but they both treat it very differently. It's a role that Malachi's trying to like fit into and be big enough for, and then for Abigail it feels like she's too big for the power that she seems to have acquired. It wasn't enough for her.
She carved her way out of the bounds of her power. She expands it with every chapter.
I think when I was reading, I remember reading, and it was like the line specifically saying that people would joke that her husband went proudly into the mist because it was warmer than his whatever his bed was, and I was just like, I remember putting my little tab note by that line because I'm like, okay, this is gonna be a character to remember if her husband did willingly go into the darkness.
All right, we got some people who played the thief.
Yes. You definitely have to read it, especially if you're a character-based reader, because you will enjoy it. Are there any regrets you have with where some of the characters have gone?
I always regret killing characters, even though when they have to die, because I always wanted to have done a bit more with them. For the ones that actually make it out the other end of the book, the joy of writing several books in a row is if you've not done enough with them, you can always do a little bit more later. So there are certainly characters I wanted to see more of in Legacy of Ash, but even in sort of 800 pages, there's only so much space to go around. So we will definitely get to see a lot more of some of those characters in future.
Speaking of the characters, is there a character that you feel like is closely similar to yourself, or a character that you relate to?
Oh, it's the kind of answer that just gets me locked up, isn't it? That one. Most of the characters' negative personality traits are mine.
A little bit of your negativity.
You have a murderer in our midst? Is there an imposter among us?
It's that terrible thing of it's a lot easier to excise the bits of you that you go, no, I wish I didn't do that. So Victor's certainty of going after particular solutions and not necessarily stopping and thinking about it all the way through to start with. Yeah, that's one of mine. Yeah, you can kind of apply that across the board, or at least that's what I think in my darker moments for myself. I think I would like to be a lot more like the Rebeccas and the Kirkuses of this world and going, hang on, no, be more practical about the situation. But I think I end up a lot more like Jasiri or Victor. I'm not quite at Abigail level yet, I don't think.
Malachi's family unit is so adorable. The wife, the kids,
the daughter is.
The son is like, no, you're my subjects. Let's get to it.
The daughter definitely has that fire that I hope that Malachi starts to take inspiration from, because she is someone that would inherit that role and do it justice, because she just has all the fire, and it has to come from the wife because Malachi has no fire. But I think that it's important to have characters that are, especially in a political book, because we start off with political prisoners, characters that know how to maneuver politics, as opposed to those that are just like, I say we start chopping heads and see what happens from there. And we have quite a few of those in this book.
Oh, there's a point in any problem where I get to that a solution very, very quickly. It has to be said.
That is the role. We love good murders, and I was very satisfied with the one that we got at the end of this book. It was perfect for me.
So, as you have just now finished book 3, is this the end or the last we the people will see of the Trusting Republic, or might you revisit in the future?
I really want to come back to it. There are a bunch of other stories that I have in my brain, or half written, or in various states of writing, that I would love to be able to do something with. But who knows at this point? We're still quite early on because, of course, obviously, first book's out, second book is imminent. So I don't know if and when all that will surface, but there are characters in these stories that in my head go forward and have quite a lot of other things to do, and I would love to be able to talk about that at some point. But yeah, at the moment, the answer is yes, I would love to, but we'll have to see.
Are you, with you having written the third book and, you know, editing and stuff like that, are you going to miss the frustration and just the mood swings of writing, of writing Legacy?
It's that weird thing because at the moment, I'm not actually physically writing another novel. I do a lot of sort of freelance creative consultancy work, and that's where my time's going at the moment. And I think so. I handed over the manuscript end of July. So at this point, it's probably my longest period of not physically writing a novel for about the last 6 or 7 years now, and it's a really odd feeling. And I always find it's I kind of need a break now. I don't want to get back into it, but then it feels weird that you're not doing something with it. So sooner or later, I'm going to have to start writing some stuff down again. It's going to be.
I would think with COVID, this would be like prime writing time for authors because we're all in the house.
But authors are at home anyway.
True, actually. And one of the last questions we're going to take is, when can we expect Unnamed Book 3? Just a bulb.
What do you think? What do you guys think the name will be? We have Ash, Steel.
Might be Fire. I feel like Legacy of
Ruin.
Of Flames, Legacy of Ruin. I feel like with the people in this kingdom, I don't know how much is going to be left, especially because I've started book 2, and so some kingdoms are trying to merge with other kingdoms, and I don't know which kingdom's going to stand, if there will even be a kingdom left.
Ashes. We started with Ashes. We can't go back to Ashes, so
Legacy of Ash and then Legacy of Ashes. Maybe that'll be it.
Legacy of more ashes. There you go.
I haven't really liked Ash when I want to. Matthew, what series do you go back to when you need a break from writing?
So what have I been reading recently? I actually went back to the Warlord Chronicles, so the Bernard Cornwall King Arthur thing. I actually finally had a week off at the end of last month, and I went back through those, and that was lovely because that's a series it's one of those things. It's a wonderful tragedy series because, of course, it's Arthurian myths, so nothing good ever lasts forever. But it does a wonderful job of making you think, I like this moment here where all the wars have stopped and everyone's happy and it's all going to be fine. And then you realize you're halfway through the book and you realize the Tristan and Isolde story is just around the corner and it's all going to go horribly wrong. But for me, a really good tragedy is one that can sell you on the idea that this time, actually, it's going to work out differently, even though you've read it 50 times before, and of course, still exactly the same.
All my underdogs are going to get through this war, and nothing bad is going to happen. No sacrifice will have to be made.
That character isn't going to die at the halfway point, and things like that. It's that's where I go to because I just love that tantalization of, yes, it's going to be fine. Forget about the 50 times you read it before. This time it's going to work out for these characters.
That's how I felt reading this one for the character that we lost in the beginning that I was so attached to. I just knew that they were going to make it through. And when we got to the scene, I still didn't want to believe it. I was just like, this is going to work, even though I know
it's going to be the typical fantasy thing where the dead don't stay dead, of course.
No, I think they're very much dead, but it helps me other people. It helped me when other people started reading it and they had the same shock. Like Aaron even texted me, it was like, I can't believe that this person is just gone. I said, I felt the same way. It just felt like the room went missing, like something's missing in this. I don't know. Definitely, I have that feeling when I reread it. But we wanted to say thank you again for joining us. This has been absolutely amazing. I have so many more insights into the book. Very excited to read Legacy of Steel with the rest of you guys next month.
And speaking of Legacy of Steel, before we go, we have 2 copies of Legacy of Steel. You cannot see them, but they are here to give away. So we're gonna give them to some people in the chat. So we're going to do maybe 1 or 2 quick trivia questions, and the first person to answer, I want to say US only. I'm so sorry. We'll get
Thank you. So we're gonna let Matthew go. And before you guys go, make sure you guys follow him on Twitter and also Orbit, because they sent us some advanced copies of Legacy of Steel. So this will be a sponsored giveaway from the publishing company itself. And we love that. Thank you so much, Matthew, for
out November 3rd. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.
Alrighty. So what kind of, people haven't really gotten.
Okay, I feel like this is one that might work. Now you have to have been a close reader to know it's a very small fact. Okay, what is the name of the white-robed maidens in the Hadari?
I have the worst memory ever. I'm like, what are their names?
Your name matches your appearance in a way. What is the name of the group of the white-robed maidens?
I'm gonna give the people a chance to answer the second question that is not obvious.
Everybody's like going to grab their book. I can
tell. Racing to the page.
When I see the answer, I don't know.
If no one gets it in the chat, we'll have to post it on Twitter. It'll have to be like the first person who responds on Twitter.
Ha! MJ's got it. Luna Sarah.
But they have already pre-ordered the book. That's also a great thing.
Yes. Okay. Mona, you got your question ready?
Nope. Because I don't know what to ask. I feel like I'm going to make it too hard because I've read the entire.
Okay. What is Constance the king of? Constance declared himself the king of X. What is it?
I hope we get to see Constance grow up. I want to see him get his mischief all throughout the kingdom.
I know why Malachi has gray hair, honey.
Malachi is stressed out at work and at home, but I would love to see Constance shake the table a bit in the kingdom. We're gonna have to tweet this question since MJ already
yes
pre-ordered.
That's the first question. That's the second question, so that'll be easy.
Yes. And yeah, we'll probably tweet out those questions, one on my Twitter, one on Aaron's, and the first person to respond will be gifting copies of Legacy of Steel too.
Thank you all for joining us today. We hope we kept it pretty spoiler free. So if you have not finished, we hope we've motivated you to pick it up and or to finish. You got 2 weeks until book number 2 comes out. And if you have an advance notice, so if you can think of the answer to the question by the time I post it, you can of course hop on over to our Twitters and respond to win the giveaway. Yes.
I think that Sadara has very overprotective parents, particularly her mother, and you can't protect your kids forever. You just simply can't. So I think that we'll see a lot more of her.
Thank you. Our live show will be spoiler filled for book 1 and book 2. Yay, Cassie!
When we finish Legacy of Steel, we're gonna have all the tea. All the tea will be in the chat. So make sure you guys join us next month because I have so many opinions So many, and I can't wait to share them with you guys. This was fun. Thanks for joining us. Check our Twitter for when we tweet those questions so you guys can answer, and we will talk to you guys soon. Bye.